Hey everybody, hope everybody's doing good today. Welcome back to the shop. Got rained out at work today, so I figure it's as good a time as any to try to finish up that Damascus knife. We got all our handle stuff ready to go. Our scales are here. We got our pins and everything. We got our micarta made. We just basically need to get the handle assembled and start the finish work on it, and then put our final edge on the blade. You know, if you watch any of my videos, you know I don't like to sharpen my blades up until after the handle is put on and everything, and we're all good to go and I'm done handling the knife. You know, then we can sharpen the knife. I see a lot of guys, they put tape around it, paper or cloth, and tape it on the blade or whatever to keep from cutting themselves. And I mean, I don't see, whatever works. You know, I just choose to leave it. I get it close. We get it down to within, a 32nd or a 64th, somewhere in there where you can still grab the blade and handle the knife, and not worry about cutting yourself. And then we get all our handle work done, and then we sharpen the blades. The last thing we do is we put that final secondary bevel on. So got our coffee, got the shop warming up a little bit, got the forge on low, garage doors cracked a little, windows cracked a little, so we don't asphyxiate ourselves. And we're going to get this knife wrapped up because we need to start another one. I'm going to make myself a knife, I think, on this next one. And all the knives I make, and I have a couple little knives, but I never made myself any kind of a special knife, so I've got a cool idea. I think it's going to be pretty neat, and we're going to start for our next project. So hey, let's get to work on this thing and try to get it wrapped up. So we pretty much got everything we need to. I still need to drill this scale. We got all the holes drilled in this scale, and got all our little bolster parts here and our pommel parts here. Got a couple of pins cut for these centers. I need to cut some more pins for these, but we're getting there. I just want to get all this assembled. I think what we're going to do first is we're going to put on our micarta. We can get it facing the proper direction here. We're going to put on our micarta. We're going to put our bolsters on and our pommel pieces like so. And we're going to get all of that glued and pinned into place. Because it's just too many pieces of the handle to try to do it all in one shot. And I've noticed when I was working on these bolsters and these pommel pieces, some of the holes were drilled just a little bit off. So the pins want to they don't go straight through. They want to kind of bind a little bit as they go through. So I think if we get all our holes drilled in our other piece of micarta, and then we're going to try to glue these and pin them. And then once that glue sets up, then we'll go ahead and we'll cut our scales where we want them and get those all lined up right, and then we'll glue those and pin those on. So kind of an involved handle with all the pieces and parts and what have you that we have to do here, but we'll get her done. So we'll get this other scale liner here drilled and lined up. Make sure we got all our pins ready and everything ready to go, and then we'll mix up some epoxy, and we'll get that part of it put together. And it doesn't take, I use that 5-minute epoxy, so it doesn't take very long for that to set up to where it's workable. We'll get that set up, and then we'll get all that pinned together, and then we'll do our scales after that. part of the gluing and pinning process all seals, hardens up. Okay, well, we got both of our scale liners drilled here, and I've decided, because of the complexity of this handle, and there's so many pieces, and we're using 5-minute epoxy, what we're going to do is I've got my 2 center pins here for my main scales, and we're gonna just glue these on to start with. And I know they're way huge, but you know my motto, build big, grind small. We're going to get these glued into place, and we'll just use these 2 center pins, and we just won't get any glue on them, so we can get them back out easily. And but we'll glue everywhere we can without getting any glue on these 2 center pins, which will still be plenty enough glue to hold. And we'll get these liners glued into position here. And then if we have to, we can re-drill through these smaller holes if there's some glue in the way or whatever. And then once these are set up, then we'll come back and we'll put our bolsters and our pommel pieces on and glue them and pin them. Then once that's set up, we'll come back, we'll cut our center pieces of wood for our main scales, and we'll get those on. So kind of a process, but that's the way we're going to have to do it here, because there's just too much going on. You know, if I try to glue all this at once, there's 8 pins and 6 different handle pieces, and I'd never get it all put together and pinned and together and able to clamp it before that glue started to set up too much. So we're going to do it just, you know, in 3 different phases here. So let me grab a piece of this 60 grit. I'm kind of standing back here where you can't really see me, but I don't want to get a bunch of dust on our paper there. We're just roughing this up. Whoops. We're just going to rough this up so the glue will stick well, which, you know, epoxy will stick to anything anyway, but just to be on the safe side, we'll get these roughed up here. Just makes it a little better, makes it a little easier for the glue to do its job. And of course the whole surface of this isn't going to be glued to the knife, but we'll get it all scuffed up anyway. Now we'll grab a little bit of our, we kind of need to scuff that. Well, this tang is pretty scuffed up still just from grinding on it and what have you, but maybe we'll scuff that up just a little bit too. I'll clean these up and get all that dust off, a little acetone. Make sure they're ready to go. And one other thing that we did that I didn't show you on camera is before I got ready to pin these, I went ahead and made sure, because this part of the scale up here is right at the blade underneath our bolsters. We're not going to be able to do any finish work on this, so I went ahead and sanded these as smooth as we wanted them and that, so that when we put our polyurethane on there, it's all cleaned up and ready to go in these front edges. And I've trimmed these front edges to match the bolsters, so that we don't have to try to do any trimming up here or messing around up here any more than we have to once this is put on, because we don't want to scratch our blade and our you know, and the parts of our knife that are exposed here. So so there's that. So alright, let's get some glue mixed up, and well, let's scuff this up a little here first. Make sure this is kind of roughed up. And again, this isn't something that you need to spend all day on. You know, we're just trying to scratch it, and we did. It doesn't take much with a 60 grit piece of sandpaper to scratch that up a little bit. That's all we wanted to do. Just get that scratched up so that the glue will stick to it really well. Now we'll get our little stick and get some epoxy mixed up here and get these suckers glued on and get on with this program. I'm really ready to get this knife finished up. I may have to go, probably going to have to go and get some more epoxy in the middle of this whole mess here, because we're running low. Alright, well, let's get some epoxy on this thing. Again, I don't want to get it where my center pins are going to be. Because we're going to use those pins to line everything up. And I want to be able to get those back out. So there's that side. Get some glue on this other side. And, you know, of course I went and mixed up way too much glue for just doing these two scales. But it sucks to have to stop in the middle of gluing something together and have to mix up more glue, so I guess it's just as well that we have a little more than we need, huh? Grab a paper towel. Got a little bit of glue on my fingers. I don't want to get it on that blade. Although it comes off pretty easily with a little acetone, we still would rather not get it on there. And then we don't have to deal with it. So I'm just going to throw some of these little clamps here on there, I believe. It's really kind of tough to see how our holes are lining up here, but our small holes, because like I told you, some of our holes were a little bit off, not terribly, but they were a little off, and but we can re-drill those. We'll re-drill through those if we have to. I'm just looking here to see how. I think I'm going to go like that and go like this back here. Getting a little bit of glue on my clamp, but gosh, I don't want that clamp to stick. Well, I think we'll be able to get it off all right. Okay, looks like we got our scale liners glued on and they're where they're supposed to be. So we'll come back here in a little bit once these have had a chance to set up, and we'll carry on from there. Well, alright, so our micarta is set up. Our epoxy set on our micarta, so we're going to re-drill these small holes because they got all filled in with glue while we glued that up. Why is my blade? Why is my little drill bit wobbling here? Is it bent? Could be bent. Drill some hard steel with that, even when it's annealed, you know. Wow, that thing is really wobbling. It wasn't wobbling like that before. Wonder what's going on with that. Oh, it's a little better. We'll have to lower the table, or raise the table up a little here. That'll work. So we got our holes re-drilled here. I better drill them the other way, I guess. There they are, all re-drilled out. They were full of epoxy, now they're not. So, now we're going to cut most of this excess off of here, because there's really no reason to have all of that excess. My card is sticking out everywhere. And we're not trying to get it all off there. We just don't need all of it. Just makes it a whole lot more grinding, and you know, if we have all that on there. So alright, we've got our scale liners on. Now we got to kind of smooth that up, clean that up a little. And over here where we got a bunch of glue on there, we'll do that on the belt sander. And get this side ready to accept our bolsters and our pommel pieces. So we'll get that done. We'll be back. Okay, well, we've got all our pieces ready to go here. These are on and trimmed up. They're not perfect, but we'll grind it off. I just wanted to get the majority of it off. And then I've taken my little Dremel and scribed some lines in here on both sides. And we scribed these up a little bit, just to give the epoxy something to get into, and we've just wiped these down with some acetone, and we're just kind of going to let these dry off here for just a second, and we're going to mix up some epoxy and get to pinning things together here. We're going to use a couple of pairs of vice grips, I think, on these, because I want to be able to hold these aluminum pieces fairly firmly. Because they have to fit just right, and I really don't want to have to cut this off and do it again. So, and with our pins sticking through here, we're really not going to have a whole lot of room for regular clamps. Man, that's a pretty pattern, isn't it? It's going to be a good looking knife when it's done. Wish I could keep it, but I've already promised it to my buddy Scott. So it's as good as gone already, but we need to get it done. I want to move on and make myself a knife next, I believe. I've been making all these knives, and I have a couple little knives that, well, I'm only left with one little knife that I use here in the shop. Kind of one of my first etching experiments. I made this handle out of, made this micarta handle out of some sponge, you know. But it's a good little knife. It cuts real well, so I just use it around here in the shop. It's nothing fancy, schmancy, or beautiful, but I was just doing some acid etching, testing on the blade with it, and it was one of you know, it was just an attempt to see what a sponge would do with some, you know, fiberglass resin, which is what I use to make my epoxy. And, you know, it didn't come out horrible, but it's a small little knife, and it comes in real handy out here in the shop for doing whatever. So, well, let's get a. I might have to go in the house and grab another deal of epoxy. While we were waiting for our the epoxy to dry on those scale liners, I had to run and fill up my propane tank. So while I was there doing that, I decided to grab some more epoxy because we were almost out. So this seems to be some pretty fast curing stuff. So I need to get it on here and get these things pinned together. Got all our pins cut and trimmed, hopefully, where they need to be. There's that side. That wasn't so bad. Just put our epoxy right on the back of this little dude here for this side, for this one. Always got to get a little bit on my fingers. I don't know what that's all about, but can never seem to. Well, I hope these little vice grips will fit on here. I think they will. That's going to be okay. That front, that bolster. Now, back. Oh no, but we have enough glue here. We'll have enough to at least get this one side. Quite a project with the minimal tools that I have in my shop, trying to get these surfaces flat first of all, so that everything fits together without any gaps or cracks. And then my bandsaw was broke. Trying to cut these out, that was kind of an adventure. But it all seems to have come out in the wash. Okay. There we have it. Our aluminum and our scale liners are pinned and in place. Now here in a little bit, when those get dried up, we'll, you know what, I better get that glue out of here. Where our wood's gonna go. Because once that stuff's set up, it'll be kind of hard to get out of there, so that has to be nice and flush and even in there where we're going to put our wood. God, I don't want to ruin my rag. I'm going to get a paper towel. Looks like we got that. So, one step closer. Once these are set up good, then all we have to do is take our wood scale material, measure that, get it cut. We'll cut it long because we've only got the one set, so it's going to be critical that we get them to fit properly the first time, because they were 32 bucks for that Coca-Cola wood, and so we don't want to have to buy that again. Scott doesn't want to have to buy that again. So this is going to be one of those situations where measure twice and cut once is going to be very critical, because we cut them too short and then we're 32 bucks out the window, you know. So we'll take our scales here and we'll line them up about like that. We'll zip this little bit here off. This part here is going to go to the back of the handle. So we'll cut that to fit, cut it to a little long up here, and then we'll grind them in so that they fit perfectly. You know, we'll just go on our belt grinder. We'll just take a little bit off and test it, and a little bit off and test it until we have them perfect. And then they'll get glued and pinned. So we'll be back in a little bit when that gets all cured up. Okay, well, we got our aluminum is all pinned and glued and what have you. We're going to cut these off now. I'm going to leave them just a hair so that I can bevel them a little bit. Or, yeah, I guess I'd peen them. So I can peen them over just a little. Alright guys, we've got our scale liners put on here. Got our bolsters and our pommel pieces in place, all pinned and glued. We ground them all. Ground the pins even and nice. I didn't want to grind too much because we still got to do some grinding after we put our scales on. But that's the wrong scale. I've got my scales marked, and I would have had these put on. But these are the scales that are going on the knife, and they've got to be cut perfectly. I've marked them a little bit long so that when we cut them, we've got room, you know. Again, my motto, build big, grind small, you know. But I've got these all marked out to where they're ready to be cut with the pattern the way we want it. I think these came out pretty good on here. I mean, there was just no way, with as many pieces as I had, you know, I've got 2 scale liners, 4 pieces of aluminum, 8 pins, and 2 scales. There's no way we were going to glue all that up and put all that on at one time. So we went ahead and we glued the liners on first and got them in position, and then drilled the holes out, these small holes here where we got glue in them. Then we glued and pinned our bolsters and our pommel pieces on, and got those all in position, and then we cut our, you know, trimmed our micarta and ground it into shape here, and got that all ready where it's supposed to be. And now all we got to do is get our scales cut and shaped, you know, get the ends. It's going to be kind of meticulous because we're going to cut them off a little bit large, and then we're going to grind them on the belt grinder so that the ends, you know, meet perfectly with the aluminum. We don't want any gaps in there or anything, so that's going to be kind of another, you know, I mean, this is an intricate, this is kind of a, you know, it's a complex handle. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to it, there's a lot to do, and we don't want to get in a big hurry and find out that we have gaps in here or something like that, you know, where the scales meet. So we're going to have to take our time and cut the scales, and I would have cut these scales and had them on. I would have had these scales pinned and glued and been shaping them already, but Scott wants to be here. It's his knife. He wants to be here when we cut the scales and fit them. So he said he was going to be over this evening and after work, but I guess he got waylaid. He didn't show up, and I almost went ahead and did it because I need to get this knife done. You know, I mean, this Damascus knife has been dragging along. I think I've built 2 other knives in the time that I've been working on this, since I started this Damascus billet and started this knife. So but we're going to call this one done for today. Like I say, we made pretty good progress. We would have made a lot better progress had we been able to go ahead and cut those scales and get them on there and sized and fit and get them glued on and start shaping them and that. I mean, we're right there. We want to get this knife done. So tomorrow, hopefully Scott brings his butt over here and we'll get these scales cut and fitted and get them glued and pinned into place. And then it's just a matter of shaping. And once the scales are shaped where we want them, then it's finished sanding and polishing that aluminum up and getting those scales sanded nicely, and then polyurethane and sand and polyurethane and sand and polyurethane and say, you know the drill. But we're right there. We're like that far away from the finish line, so I'll be glad to get this one done. And then we're going to move on to a knife for me. Finally, I'm going to make myself a knife. Like I said earlier, I have this one that I just kind of made. It's like a mini chopper. And it was just kind of a knife where I was testing different things out. I ground these bevels freehand, and they didn't come out very well. I did some etching on this blade. And, you know, it's not horrible, but just kind of wanted to test, you know, the finger polish method and see how it worked out. Made this micarta from a sponge, believe it or not, a green sponge soaked in fiberglass resin, and then I put the 2/4 inch and 1/8 inch pin in there, and it's not anything I'd try to sell anybody or anything, because we got a little wild on shaping the handle, and it's a little small. It doesn't really fit your hand very well. I mean, it makes a good shop knife. I cut sandpaper. I trim little pieces of epoxy that squeeze out that I didn't notice or that I didn't get cleaned with the acetone. This knife works real well for, you know, kind of chipping. It's almost like a razor. It's very sharp, and the bevels aren't even, but they're very sharp. So, but now I'm going to make myself a nice knife, and it's going to be, well, we'll just say it's going to be like a biker knife. But that's all I'm going to say for now. You'll see what I'm going to do when I do it. So I don't want to let the whole cat out of the bag. I kind of want to keep it a little bit of a secret until we get there. But it's going to be a 5160 knife, leaf spring like I made for Bob. The Damascus is really cool and it's beautiful, but it's really time consuming, painstaking, hard to do, especially this twisted one. Just a straight Damascus billet is hard to forge weld and get all welded without inclusions or, you know, or cold shuts and all that. And then to put 6 full twists in it and to make the blade look like that, I mean, that's, you know, that's just a whole lot of work. And then to top it off, I decide I'm going to put all this aluminum and all these pins and, you know, it'll be a beautiful knife when it's done, but I don't, you know, that's not something I'm going to do real often. It's just very time consuming. And this knife has dragged on and on since we first forge welded that billet of Damascus. So I'm going to make a knife out of a solid piece of 5160 leaf spring. And, but it's going to have a kind of a biker theme to it. And it's going to be fairly large. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be a blast. We may do something special with the handle. I don't think we'll go the whole aluminum route. That was just a real, I don't know. We'll see when we get there. I learned a lot doing these. I've never done a knife with these bolsters and these pommel pieces like this before. But now that I've done one, you know, I mean, until you do something, you know, the first time it's always kind of hard, and then each time thereafter it gets a little easier. So anyway, we're going to start on that knife as soon as we get this one finished. And in fact, we may start on it in the morning. Tomorrow's Saturday. I was off work today is why I was able to do this. We got rained out, so we'll have no work tomorrow. So we'll be down here in the shop again. And we may start forging my knife tomorrow because I think Scott works until the afternoon. So we won't probably be able to mess with those scales anymore and finish that up until tomorrow afternoon. So in the morning, we may cut us a piece of leaf spring and start banging out my knife. I've been itching to get back on the anvil anyway. Oh, and today, while I was waiting for some of my epoxy to dry, I was going to video this, but then I thought, you know, I'm putting on a hammerhead. It's not that big a deal, but we got our hammer all mounted up here with a new hickory handle. It's a nice handle. I can already feel it's going to be really nice in my hand. I only made that original handle that I had on here because I needed my knife. I needed my hammer, you know. And this worked all right, but it's just too round in here, you know. In this part here, it's just too round. I didn't grind it like I should have. I got a little carried away with my belt grinder, and then the end up here, I never did get it right to where it would expand enough to keep the head on. And we didn't glue it. You know, we didn't put any epoxy up here whatsoever. It was just straight oak with the wedge in it and a steel wedge that I made. So this one here came with a hickory wedge and a steel wedge, and I epoxied the crap out of it too when I put this one on. I had to shape it a little bit to get it, you know, where it fit the head properly, and we got it indexed right, and I think that's going to really be nice. That's going to make my forging and my planishing and everything a little easier. So Anyway, enough jabbering. I really appreciate you hanging out with me in the shop today. With Scott, I intended to show the scales being all done and everything, and at least that part of it, but with him not being able to show up tonight, we weren't able to get that done. So hopefully we finish that up, at least finish getting the scales mounted and everything tomorrow, and it's going to take a few days of sanding and, you know, and polyurethane and sand and more poly. And you've kind of got to let that poly cure pretty well before you sand it. And then when you sand it, you use like a 1200 grit and you just barely touch it. I mean, you're not like you're rubbing away. You're just lightly, all you're doing is scuffing off the little fuzzies, and maybe if there's a little bubble in that poly somewhere, you know, you're just barely lightly scuffing that off, and then you put another coat. And that stuff is very thin, and it takes a long time for it to cure enough that you can sand again. So hopefully by the end of the weekend that knife is finished and out of our hair and we're done with it. But anyway, yeah, we'll probably start out a new knife for myself tomorrow. Yes, I get a knife. A nice knife. I think you guys are going to enjoy this one too. It's going to be different. It's a different twist that I've been thinking about and I've had in my head for a little while, and it's going to be fun. I'm going to enjoy it, and I hope you can come along with me when we do this knife. So I appreciate you watching. Get out to your shop, do something, have some fun. Let your worries and cares roll off your back and just get into a project of some kind. You know, it doesn't have to be forging or making a knife or anything. Whatever it is, you know, whatever it is you do. Heck, if nothing else, go out and clean your shop. I've seen a lot of people's garages, and I know how mine gets at times, you know, and in fact, that's going to be very soon, a new project for me. I need to clean my shop. My floor is all covered in forge scale and grinder shavings and sawdust and ends and pieces of pins and little pieces of metal and wood and garbage everywhere. So my benches are dirty again, and it's about time to blow this thing out and clean up again. So I may do that in the morning if I decide to start on my knife in the morning, which I think I'm going to. So anyway, thanks for being here. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you on the next one.